Like on sharing and
You hear
sharing.
that okay? You hear that okay now?
If you're on the Wi-Fi, it could be the Wi-Fi, remember that you're on the data. All of a sudden,
Yes, we can hear that now.
Okay. Well, firstly, apologies about the white screen. I don't know why my slides aren't sharing.
Do you want to try sharing it again?
Yeah.
Make it unsharing and share again.
usually too,
Uh,
see if it's any better.
Is it like this problem?
I think it was something to do with the method of sharing the PowerPoint.
Let's go again.
Yeah.
That's one, right? That was it. Mm-hmm.
The next one is if there's anything.
Okay.
There we go.
Here we
Oh,
go.
we've got animation.
We're caught up. So what is castor fibre? It's a semi-aquatic herbivorous mammal, the largest rodent in Europe. They live around water, eat plants, leaves and bark. They do not eat fish, a common misconception about beaver. They are vegetarian.
You don't bark though.
They don't, they kind of do make a barking noise. So that's what they look like, in case there's any confusion. They're actually quite cute. They look like a big guinea pig or something like that. Yeah. Most people call them beavers unless you're an ecologist like me. I'll be using the word beaver a lot, so keep your sniggers in check if you can. So more about beavers. There's two species, the Eurasian and the North American. The North American is Castor canadensis, and the Eurasian beaver is Castor fibre. They mate for life. They usually have 2 kits a year. Sometimes they can have 3 or 4. Last year's kits tend to live around for a year or two, helping with next year's until they get kicked out, basically. And then they have to find their own territory. They're highly territorial mammals. They're more tolerant of their own kin as neighbours, but they will fight to the death for their spot. They're quite a self-regulating population where they're established, and that is not the situation they have in Scotland just now. But the beaver on beaver interaction is more the most established way of them controlling their numbers. It's not something that you have to kind of really go around shooting a lot in a lot of places. It can be done, but they're good at kind of taking care of themselves that way. There's only so much space for them once they reach capacity. Adults are quite large. You can see the picture on the right here. That animal is about 20 to 30 kilos. They can get to 7 or 8 years in the wild. Sometimes they can live for over 20 years. That picture there is actually a Canadian beaver. Just so happens that that photographer there has some really good imagery, so I just stole it for all the difference it is to you and I, whether it's Canadian or Eurasian. It's the same looking animal, same sort of size. There's not a lot of difference.
Chunky,
They are big. I could have shared an image of one that had been hit by a train, but that wasn't very pleasant. You can see just how big it is. It's basically from rail to rail. That was a good size, that animal, before the train sorted it out. You could say that was karma for it blocking the culvert. They had no choice but to go over the track, and there's only going to be one winner. They've got large incisors that don't stop growing. Anybody with guinea pigs will know that's something that they do, or other rodents. They need to kind of keep chewing them to keep them sharp so they can keep eating. Beavers went extinct in the UK in the 1600s. They were highly sought after for their fur. Rabbie Burns wrote a sonnet called Cock Up Your Beaver. He's known for alcoholism and womanizing, so you might let your mind wander to somewhere inappropriate here, but actually the sonnet is about having a beaver pelt hat and sticking a cock pheasant feather in it, because apparently that was the way that you looked hip and cool back in his day. So Cock Up Your Beaver is about having a nice fancy hat. Were very popular for the fur back then. They were also popular for food. Good eating in a beaver, apparently, so we hunted them into extinction for that. And another thing that they really liked about them was the anal gland secretions. They were popularly used in perfumes and used in food flavourings once upon a time. So there's a lot of demand for beaver. and we basically wiped them out in Scotland, and they were reintroduced unofficially in the early 2000s without any kind of approval. They were a few escapees from a wildlife park around about Creefway. I think there's some other kind of escape from private collections round about the Isla area in the Tay catchment, and eventually these animals started interacting with the other escapees, and we had a population on the go that nobody really knew much about. Meanwhile, the Scottish Government were in the throes of doing an actual controlled release over in Argyll, and that went underway in 2009, before people really appreciated just how many beavers were actually in the Tay population anyway.
So was the introduction deliberate and coincided with an accidental reintroduction?
It is argued that there was accidental releases, and some people suspect that there were some deliberate releases as well. Once it was known that they were there, that people felt, well, we should try and get these animals
Since we
going.
no longer look for them for the renal secretions.
Yeah, there are actually other benefits to them, which is a nice segue onto this next slide. Why have they been reintroduced? So they are a keystone species. They're masters of engineering their own environment and coming up with nature-based solutions. The wetland habitat that they create is excellent for trapping silt in water courses, for oxygenating the water as it goes over the dam and down the other side. The extra plant life around the wetlands is great for increasing carbon sequestration. The habitat's great for fish and amphibians, and great for insect diversity as well. All of that helps at a trophic level to create food availability for other species and boost the overall biodiversity of an area. The other thing that the dams are very good for is they offer flood alleviation. The best places to have beaver is up the catchment. If there's more beaver territory higher up the catchment, then they're slowing the water getting down to the built-up urban area where we cannot cope with the runoff that we get. So any way to slow that down is a really good and positive thing. And some councils in England have been putting their own leaky dams in to try and create this effect, because they don't yet have beavers as widely distributed as we do in Scotland. So it's a known kind of thing that's really good at slowing the water down. There's good papers being produced about the Bavarian beaver population and the impacts that the flash regime is, the way that works when there's beavers present. It's so much slower. It can take hours to get through the system when it would take minutes if they weren't there, and you were just having a very natural channel.
So that free labour, if you like, to put the choke in the water flow,
Yeah.
is absolutely critical going forward. We're looking at climate change to reducing perhaps the issues they're having in Europe at the moment, where they're sitting waiting on the big bow wave coming.
Yeah.
We're up in here, never mind in Europe, aren't we?
Well,
Yeah.
years ago, there was happening that in Spain, somebody released some beavers. And people were complaining because, oh yeah, these dams are producing flooding because of course the water levels grow there. It's like, you are a moron, because that is slowing the water down and avoiding floodings downstream.
Yeah,
So
it's a natural choke on the flow.
it's people not knowing about basic hydraulics and just saying whatever they want in social media. But of course, it's going to slow the floods down.
Yeah,
I quite like that idea that it's a natural solution to
Other
You know,
problems.
modern problems, effectively. So we change the climate, we produce more pluvial flow in very short.
We took out
Spaces.
the
Yeah,
they don't want to go to Vienna this week, that's what I'll say.
we
No.
made them straight, didn't we?
Yeah, we canalised a lot of water courses. We did that. There's a really good example of where we've done it for the railway. The Allen water catchment was really heavily canalised. There should have been about 30 viaducts required to complete the line there, but with agreement with the landowners, everybody felt that could just canalise here and allowed putting some flood defences. They were able to kind of farm that land differently. We were able to put a railway in, and now the Forth Rivers Trust are doing a bit of work to renaturalise that. So they're taking away some of the flood protection and they're pushing it north of the railway line, or is it north? West, into an area and creating floodplain, that kind of thing.
some of the
Yeah,
things that are happening now due to reduced maintenance, I'll say, of off-track areas
Mhm.
is we're let's take Thornley Bank. So Thornley Bank at the bottom of the hill receives, sorry, Steve, Thornley Bank at the bottom of the hill receives a lot of pluvial flow from further upstream, all the way up to East Kilbride, if you follow the Aldhouse Burn. And it has, because of lack of attention to the flow, it suffered from fallen trees, fallen logs, providing natural obstacles. But the initial reaction would be, well, let's ditch that. Let's improve the flow of water and reduce the amount of catchment area, that marsh area, and actually allow the water to have a conduit to flow to the river, to the sea. But in essence, what that's doing is saying, well, actually, that's probably going more towards what the beavers do, is this natural creation of habitats for fish, amphibians, oxygenization of the water, and so on.
You slow the water down, it stabilises the banks as well, because there's less erosion taking place, and then that allows more trees to kind of recover there, and that further stabilises the embankments, etc. So there's good reasons to have them there. That said, we can also equally create problems in embankments, and we'll come to that a bit later. Where will we find them? Well, this is the 2021 census information. That is generally the catchment in bits of the Forth, in the Tay, and higher up the Tay catchment. They're kind of stuck on the way to Rannoch. And I want to say it's Loch Dew. I can't remember what that one in the middle is. You've got Loch Tummel, Loch Rannoch, whatever the one in the middle is. There's one or two beavers in there, and they're not really going anywhere.
No,
that was
released them back into Tayside, didn't it?
The Tayside ones were the non-authorised releases. They were the ones that were they're the main releases that have led to this population, because the ones in Argyll aren't even shown in the map here. There's only a handful of them down there, but it looks like the ones in the Tay catchment are trying their best to get down to Oban. They're kind of on the way there. They've sort of started coming up the West Highland line. In the film.
Have you got your mic on?
My mic is off. So we're using the main speaker. Can anyone not in the room hear me? Getting a hand up.
We're all fine here, but it's probably online, really.
Hello, it's Andrew Anderson online. Yeah, you're coming through.
Super. I'll try and speak up in case it's my mumbling that isn't getting through well enough. So that's the distribution as of 2021, about 250 territories across the country. There's been some movement on that lately because we're allowed to translocate within the country now. So there's been a few of those into areas where we didn't used to have them. Like here, that bottom corner of Loch Lomond, Gartaharn is the RSPB reserve. Some have been moved into there. So that has kind of brought them into Loch Lomond. So there's a very good chance they'll be on the Clyde fairly soon and making their way south. But also here in the Cairngorms National Park around Loch Inch, there's been at least 3 releases up here. I did mention that it'd be good to get them into the headwater. So that is trending in the right direction. But that is already a floodplain. We need them into the hills really from there. Unfortunately, where all the guns are, but we'll see how they cope. That, from a railway point of view, going to have to watch that very closely because the railway line floats through there. We've got a long stretch of railway that's not very well protected from burrowing animals. There is the high point, and these animals are intelligent. They know to get into the high ground near a water course. That's what they're aiming for. They know how to make their life easier. They don't want to have to build big lodges if they can just burrow into an earthwork. So they will if they're there. So we need to keep a close eye on that. We were consulted with the National Park, but a bit like we consult at times as Network Rail. We're just telling you this is happening. That's that. So it's done.
I find Loch Lomond will be in the Clyde shortly.
Yeah, I don't think it'll take them too long to get down there.
Yeah, eventually get there.
There's been releases around England and Wales. This is in the southwest. They're in Wales at Avon Dovey. Hopefully anybody from Wales can live with that pronunciation. I believe that's correct. But there are other places down the southwest. They're also in the southeast too. These animals are generally in areas where they're controlled as part of the agreement when they're getting relocated down there. But I believe England are starting to catch up with Scotland, and they will be allowed to exist now if they escape from any enclosures. They're looking to widen that population as well. The next place in Scotland we might see them in the Bewley catchment. We're trying to move them up in towards Glenafric, beautiful bit of the country if you've never been there. It's one of the most stunning glens in all of Scotland. Really beautifully forested as well. Really appreciate it if you get up into the Munros around there, just how vast and remote you are in a place like that. It's so nice. Beavers would do well in that landscape, I'm sure, but the consultation isn't going quite so well there. But they'll be further up the catchment from that particular area than that's shown, I think. So it won't be a huge issue for us. There'll be very few interactions with the railway there, but never say never.
Well, Africa is very far north though, isn't it?
Yeah. A good bit inland from that. It's even going further east, west, sorry. I get that mixed up all the time. Are they protected? They are indeed. They're a European protected species. Licenses are required to remove the dams, to destroy the burrows, translocate or lethally control the animals. They pose a risk to the network. Happens they do. They can burrow into the earthworks, they can dam culverts, can cause flooding, and they can definitely fell trees onto the line or other assets. So we need to be vigilant when we're doing our inspections to keep an eye out for these kind of signs in areas where we know that beavers exist. There is an example of a beaver lodge next to one of our culverts. They have burrowed in to the side of the earthwork at the mouth of the culvert, and they burrow in so far that they eventually pop up, and then they have to weatherproof it. So there's 3 different types of lodge there. A lodge, it's got a thatched roof like that. It's referred to as a lodge. Then you get a chambered burrow. It's got a little bit of a weatherproofing on the top, and the below. Those are the ones that kind of concern me a wee bit more. You don't know they're there until you put your foot through the top of them and break your leg, or get your foot bitten off by disturbing them. So that's a risk that's out there. It has actually happened at that site when I've been walking about. I've put my foot through things and I'm like, oh goodness, didn't.
Do the beavers have a preference for which type of domain they have, lodge?
The water levels will dictate that, because if the water level is very stable, you don't have to do any more work. But if they have got increased, the more they dam and the greater the impoundment, the higher the water levels get, and the more they need to burrow into the earthwork. And then eventually they come out the top, and then before you know it, they might just build a lodge in the top, and then the route down to the water is underneath that.
So they establish a presence and then think, yeah, we'll bring Belway in and we'll have more chambers and more lodges and go big.
Yeah, pretty much. They start small and go big. And even when they have a very established lodge like that, they'll have other burrows nearby. It's just a behaviour that they have, like that they know to burrow. It's almost like they're practicing it, and they just like a bolt hole in case they get caught out and they need to find somewhere to escape into. Nobody told these beavers that there's no wolves or bears. They don't really have an awful lot to worry about. You need to be a very hardy fox to fancy your chances going in one of these. But generally, they like the entrance to be underground. They like them to be covered like this. But you do see them in really quite tidal catchments, and you can see the burrows above the water line. And that is suboptimal habitat for them. They've obviously been released in a suboptimal area and they're making do with where they find themselves. And there are no wolves and bears, so they'll probably get on all right. And not to worry about the odd dog or bold fox and the odd otter that might fancy its chances. But generally, they'll see off an otter. An adult will see off an otter, but the cubs are vulnerable to them and they can get predated by.
Is that you in the picture?
That handsome gentleman there, that is me, yes. Getting a good look at that beaver lodge.
I was thinking a bit Matrix Man, the way you haven't fallen over from that.
Had a good hold of that tree. So I did say they can block the culverts. This is the first time we had to deal with a properly blocked culvert like this. They got inside and it's just stuffed full of grass and mud and lattices of wood that make it really hard to get out. It was comical watching some of the operatives trying to deal with this. They had no idea what was going on. They were trying anything to try and dislodge this stuff, and it just is practically unmovable. What we ended up having to do there was send divers in from the other side and dismantle it by hand. And they went in with kind of confined space tickets, etc. And they took it out in about a day and a half It was so easy. Kind of knew that would have worked in the first place, but we didn't really want to be doing that if there was another way. So we tried to pump that out. That was literally punching smoke there. That was a waste of time, but at least we know that now, and we won't need to try that one again. We know that divers will work. We just have to be careful about how we bring them into the business, because we don't have a specialist diving team in the business, and I think we're meant to have one for safety regs. So we need to discharge that responsibility to a deliverer that does have that capacity. The fell trees, they're very good at that too. The tree here was probably as wide as me, it's a fair old size, and if that had come down the wrong way, probably would have reached the line. So we had to send people in to take that down in a controlled fashion. If we could just convince the beavers what direction these trees should be felled, it'd be a real asset. Our works would be a real
Would be good
efficiency.
also for the leaves problem now in the
We've
fall.
got a leaf fall issue here, guys. Can you help us out? We could certainly get in and take care of that if we could just be controlled a bit better. Burrowing is the thing I mentioned before. That can be problematic. They start off, they want to come in from the water, so you can see the burrows on the side of the ditch there. That's usually got a lot of water in it over the winter, and that's why it's there, but then in the summer it kind of, the water drops down and they're a bit exposed. The dot in the distance is where it's popped up inside the boundary in our earthwork. So they obviously don't use that very much, or they would have thatched it, a bit like the one on the right. So the one on the right hand side there, that is the one that we're currently in, and we're kind of monitoring that in a minute.
So is it the situation where they find a spot, quite like it, burrow into the bank, water level drops seasonally, and then think, oh, okay, water level's down, let's make a more established thing, and let's create a dam here, bring the water levels back up.
They'll do that.
Smart enough to do that.
They will do that. They will try to dam, and that creates all kinds of problems, particularly at this site. We've had issues with the line side neighbour, getting fed up with that situation, having to deal with all the damming that they do. It can be quite hard work, and farmers feel the same. They don't have time to be investing, putting people out. And when you're working your water, you really should have two people. So it's adding a lot of expense into a farmer's routine to have somebody with them so they don't fall in the water, or a security to that kind of risk. But you can see in the bottom right picture there, there's been a bit of slippage in behind that burrow, and that's a kind of concern from a geotechnical point of view, that we could have kind of risks like that, and we don't want these areas sliding. And we know they're there, don't really know what we can do about it, because you could have these beavers shot, then what? The next lot move in, and then it's rinse and repeat. You'll never really be ahead of it. So we're trying to find ways to coexist with them. That would be optimal, to find a way to do that.
How do you know they're there? Is it off-track inspection? Is it who reports their presence?
Oh, that is leapt ahead of me. It can be anybody that just happens to see them. Often the first port of call will be from the line side neighbour. They're getting no truck with the regulator, and they go, we'll get the railway involved. And that's usually where it starts, and they assume that we're going to want them out of there. And we're a public body. We're expected to work with the other public bodies in charge of nature and find ways to cohabit with these animals. Obviously, we can get rid of them if they're a serious risk, and we have to kind of look at that as and when they come about.
So Netherreal don't have a specific policy that says, when you're doing track patrolling, off-track stuff, don't have a look and identify beaver activity.
I don't think there's anything expressed in a policy, but they should be when they're doing their vegetation and foot inspections, which are 3 year. They should be kind of looking out for any kind of defective tree, and that would include something that's been chewed, whether it's a deer, whether it's by squirrels, whether it's by beaver. All these animals will attack the bark of a tree. A tree with dead bark or with stripped bark is going to decline, because the only living bit of the tree is the bark. And if that's stripped off it, there's no way to kind of ferry nutrition and water around it, so it will start to decline. It's very easy to kill a tree, just taking the bark off it. So this is a bit of a case study we'll do here. This was Glen Eagle's estate. They dammed the stone structure in the background is the culvert. The dam downstream in that little ditch on the third party side. You can just about see our fence at the bottom of the earthwork there. They've dammed this and created a nice little impoundment, and they've burrowed
Even the curvature of the dam, eh?
Yes.
they know what they're doing. Even I should have got this into the slides and I haven't done it, but the dam is shaped in such a way that the water pressure pins it down. So it's sloped back towards the flow of the water and it's steep on the drop-off side. So it's like a wedge and the water goes over the top. Gravity pinned it
Chartered
down,
engineers, effectively.
then it drops
They
down
know
the
what
other
they're
side.
up to.
It's amazing. They are leaky dams though. You can see the water kind of overspilling it, and there's a concern that fish can't get over that. They can. Like there's nowhere in the world that has beavers that doesn't have loads of salmon. So they've co-evolved. It's not a problem. They can either swim through that dam by just forcing their way through because it is only mud and sticks, or they can just bounce their way up when the water's high enough.
Does the Queen know about this at Gleneagles?
Well, I've spoken to the young laird that's there. Don't think he cares for me very much.
No.
I write dirty look at him from him at the Royal Highland Show when I was there on Network Rail duties this year. They are very much, I think they're at the end of their tether with this. They like to shoot on this land and the beavers are just annoying them. But the rules are around prime agricultural land. They don't have it, so they don't get to legally control here. But they are saying it is having a cost impact. But that's not Network Rail's concern. Can't seem to get rid of this. So those are the telltale signs you asked for. That's what we would like people to be looking for when they're patrolling. You can't really miss these snap trees and the spears coming out of the ground. We don't want to fall on them. They're not subtle, basically. You know that beavers are there. And issues with my slides.
Like the wee arrows on the down left corner.
Thank you. So that little red square was the culvert I described. I got ahead of myself. I narrated the video like I'm David Attenborough, and I've ruined the rest of the slides.
So the problem there is the water could be so high that the water gets into the culvert and the other way around.
It stops. It stops the flow of the water.
Yeah.
It backs up into the culvert, and then how is our earthwork going to cope in that kind of saturated soil and things like that? We've not got the natural flow of the water. If anything, an impoundment upstream is better because there's less water going through the culvert. It doesn't get up to capacity, and when that's there, and if the beavers are alive and well, they're maintaining the dam. So it takes a lot for the dams to really breach and kind of blow out. They maintain them every day, as we found out, every time we tried to take that bloody thing out that culvert and couldn't get it finished. So
Beavers will be relying on the flow from the culvert coming through up below the railway to stock up that pool.
yeah, and I think one of the photos I showed, there's that little kind of gap at the top. So they blocked the culvert, but they left that little passageway. And we didn't know that was there because one had been ran over, so we assumed that they blocked it themselves, and that's why the train hit that beaver. But there actually was room for it to get through, so they can come and go.
I thought they might block the upstream side of the culvert and use the embankment as a dam, effectively. Or would that be too?
It just depends what's going on. They initially blocked downstream, and then that got knocked down, and that got knocked down so much they went, screw you, we're going into that culvert. Then they blocked the culvert, and that was hellish to try and get in and deal with. If they had been a bit further upstream, that's fine. That's what we have now, where they dam, and that suits us, but it doesn't suit the state we're trying to shoot. That was unfortunately how the first ones were dealt with. We had agreed with the estate we'd put in a flow rate device, and then we found out the estate just had them shot because this was 2015. They weren't protected down, and that was the outcome.
Numbers. Wow.
The
bunkers for weeks.
If there are any entrepreneurial people here, there will come a time where we need to start shooting them because we'll get to that capacity that we're happy with, and you could be trademarking the name Beaver Meets Bun at the minute. And
Let's think about relocation. Extermination.
Well, that's what they did, of course. They relocated. They maybe really thinking of different.
so they weren't protected in 2015, but they are now, as of 2019. And we had to revisit this site when the estate complained.
So,
They complained in 2015, they complained again in 2020.
They did it, they came back, so that's what I'm saying about, you can get rid of them, but it's a short-term thing.
Oh, right.
If you've got good habitat, the animals are going to come back, and that's what they've done
Guess
here.
what, they're back.
So this was what we agreed to install with the estate, a flow rate device, so that they can't block the end of that, and it means that they can't actually fully dam that culvert, and the drainage ditch, there would always be a flow there.
That's a challenge for a beaver, I would say.
They generally work,
I would think that out.
but that was the culvert. You can see a wee speck of light in the distance. That was the hole that the beaver was using to get in and out. And that was a really awkward culvert with those crossbars in it. It wasn't easy work, but in the end we had to send somebody up there to dismantle that by hand. But you can see why it wasn't priority one to do that, but it worked. So this is some LiDAR image of the same site. You can see that mound there, that's the beaver lodge. So our LiDAR was picking that up. It was there. That is the surrounds there. So once the culvert was flooded, the area around that, that's extensive. That must be 100 metres away from the culvert. We flooded this area. Now that might look bad, but it's actually a fen meadow. It's a protected SSSI anyway, which is another real nightmare for trying to do the work in there, because on one hand you've got protected habitat, it was flooded, you couldn't bring any machinery in there, all had to be done really from the track, and nothing about that lended itself to being operated on from the track. Hence the divers.
Describe that as a fen meadow?
Fen meadow, it's a kind of wet grassland area. So
A wetland?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's groundwater fed, so you get some really interesting rushes there. Went the wrong way. Interesting brush species in there, and different willow species. It's a natural wet woodland. That isn't even the extent of the height. It actually got probably another 80 centimetres higher than that. It got nearly to the top of the fence. The time we managed to deal with it in its entirety. These are more of the early pictures. There was still a metal thing in that. Don't know where that ever went. That grill that was in front of that culvert, we never recovered that. I don't know where it went.
Ian, into its oldies. Yeah, lunch.
There's the lodge on the right, and the block culvert.
Have they got a front door? They can knock it and say, "Oi, excuse me."
I did explain how the beaver lodge works, but that's what they do. They burrow in from the water, they find an area of land, then they thatch over the top of it, and they create a cavity with a bit of airflow, and that's how they have a lodge. The estate aren't willing to have a lodge on their land because we thought about making an artificial one. Doesn't get done very often. You don't really need to. Beavers are so hardy. You could trap a beaver and kick it out anywhere and not even leave it any food, and it would be fine. They can find food easily, they can defend themselves, and they know how to make a burrow, and they'll do it very quickly. That is not how we do it, but you could.
The short answer is trap them and take them somewhere else.
England and Wales seem to want them, so that helps. What we have now is we've got a dam. They got fed up with us dismantling their dam, that they moved further up the drain, and they built one there, and that suits us. It has a flow rate device in it as well to keep the estate happy. It can't get too big because there's a pipe in there that can drains that with one of those little mesh baskets around it.
And they walked around the pipe.
They can't because the pipe was maybe 3 or 4 meters beyond the dam, and then that metal grid is attached to it to stop them kind of.
Yeah, but they accommodated the pipe
into the dam.
restriction.
Yeah,
Within the dam, yeah.
and that's the water level back to normal. We have put some weld 868 mesh over this culvert, and we've stuck a 400 mil pipe in. We've since changed that to 600 because Nature Scott felt it was too small. There was never any bother with them using it. We got loads of video of them using it, so I don't know why they felt that had to change, but we've changed it at their request. But I think 400 would have been fine. And now it's 600, which isn't in that photo. It will be awkward for a structural engineer to get in and look at that.
Could you have left it just with a mesh, no pipe?
That's to allow them to get through, is there?
Now let's not just the beavers to get through, it lets otters get through. That mesh will probably let most fish get through, but if there was any particularly large fish, they could probably make their way down the pipe as well. There's laws, and SEPA are responsible for making sure if you alter a culvert, that you're not impeding protected species. And that's another challenge. Everywhere else where there's beavers that have solutions for this aren't working to the same hymn sheet as us. They don't have a founder population. They don't seem to worry about letting otters and things through. So they would just mesh over that, but they wouldn't mesh flat against it. They would make a kind of pyramid design coming out from that so that the animals can't properly dam against it. If they bring it out in a kind of triangular shape like that, the three sides, they can't really fully dam it off, and you'll always have flow through the culvert.
But if we meshed across the whole of that annulus there
Yeah,
without the pipe, that would restrict the flow of natural debris, and therefore the pipe allows flow of natural debris through the culvert. Well, it still prevents
yeah.
the beaver.
It's mainly for the animals. We felt that we have a regime where we get in and remove waterborne debris anyway, off-track maintenance, do that, and it would be picked up with the drainage inspections if they had to do anything. So that would be picked up naturally. And if they did dam on that, if it was perfectly flat, it's easy enough to remove a dam in front of that. We've had to do it since this happened a couple of times, and it's not that difficult. The difficulty is getting your licenses and stuff in place. And the other whole issue we had here is on the right, you can see the entrance to the lodge. Otters moved in there after the beavers left. So you've got another license required to deal with that. But that family eventually moved away. So it got easier. This being the first of its kind made the news. And proof that the 400mm pipe worked is in this video. There it is. Big fatty coming out. No bother, here's two of them probably going to disappear in it with a stick as well. So look, it's having a bit of difficulty there. Look how quickly they fixed that. They knew they just had to turn the stick around.
So smart. Well, and crows.
Yeah, so that is also present at the Museum of Translocation. They have got imagery of that, which blows my mind. And it's nice to see your work recognised. Don't remember anybody asking for permission, but there it is. And it was Tom that found it. Tom and I were heavily involved in that project, so it was quite funny for that to turn up that way. Another site where we've had issues with them is at Kindallican. They're between the A9 and the Highland Main Line there. There's a pond on the left-hand side, which you can't really see. There's a balancing pond in the middle. Then there is another pond and yeah, a bit of a burn kind of leading that away down to the Tay. Beavers are moved in here. And during some veg work, one of the veg guys put their foot through the top of the burrow that nobody knew was there. And then when we looked at the LiDAR, you could see the collapsed burrow and we could see the other lodge there. So that is something we've had to go and remediate. It's now been infilled. You can see some of the imagery there. You can see the materials kind of falling out of the track with a bit of a challenge to get that right. It's very difficult for the ecologists to mitigate that sort of thing as well, because you can't just stick an endoscope in there and see what's going on. That material just keeps falling in itself. You don't know how it's been used. And you're there to make sure that no animals get killed and the remediation of this work. And it gave them a lot of stress trying to do that. We're looking at different bits of tech we can do to make their life easier. I'd like to get a little camera on wheels to send up and into these things, but they don't really work well under water and on the mud. So we probably have to try and create a void to stick it down into the cavity. The earthwork guys don't want us creating wee voids in case you get further problems. It gets quite tricky to keep everybody on side and do the right thing here, but that
Besides
is being
that, you need a permit from whatever body, governmental body telling you, yes, it's safe, or go for it. I know there is an endangered species.
Nature Scott are our
Nature
regulator,
Scott.
and they give us a license there to do that, but we need to go and do all the survey that they need to be satisfied that you're doing the right thing. They've been very accommodating and very helpful every time we've needed them.
So is there enough, when looking at that first image on the left-hand side of that HGL2, for the track controller to spot that erosion of the embankment side, maybe even the shoulder of the ballast?
I'm surprised that wasn't picked up. risk.
Probably PLPR compliance, probably no shoulder skirts on.
But is that recognised as the potential danger that poses? That's where I'm going with it.
I mean, it should be. That is one of the risks in damaging the earthwork and causing some kind of failure, which then you end up with deformity at track level. So that wasn't far off. That's just off the ballast shoulder there.
Yeah, because as you know, we put people out to do mark with an eyeball track inspection, and they come across that as they're walking along the track and think, whatever that is.
Can't actually remember where the inquiry came from that. The first time round, it was the foot through it. Then the second time, it had been infilled, but it wasn't infilled very well. It was just a rough and ready rush to get in before the breeding season to do some work in a time, buy a bit of time, if you like. And then they dug into it again. Then we've had to kind of do it all properly grout it the second time round. But I don't know where the fault established from. I don't know if it was a patroller or a driver.
So
or how it's
there's two sides to that. There's
or
the
it could have been an earthwork exam.
inspection, reporting, and then course of action. What would be done to replace that loss of cross section, if you like, where the beaver activity is?
I think the first time they just stuck more ballast down and tamped it. I think there was a few things in between the ecologists being involved. I think more ballast got packed in there and got tamped down, assuming that it was nothing untoward.
Yeah.
And when things become a recurring problem, then people start to realise there's maybe a bit more to the eye, more than meets the eye here. That would have been another clue in the area. That's the pond next to it. There's a big tree with a bit of ring barking going on around the bottom of it. And yeah, these could very easily be going on, and you don't really know, because they can do that. Big tree would take a couple of weeks, I'm sure, to do. The wee tree would only take a couple of nights for it to get that down. How do you really keep on top of that? I had the misfortune of going to the Scotland-Germany game for the Euros this year. But while I was there, I did what any ecologist did. I went to look for some Bavarian beaver and didn't take long to find. Here I was at the English Gardens, and I could see from the other side of the water, and I was on my way around to a nice beer garden, that the beavers on this stretch of water. I could see the telltale signs, all the woody debris assembled the way that it is around a lodge. In Germany, I think they call them der Biber. So I found der Biber when I was there. And what they do over there, that looks like a path, but it's actually a really quite silty little canal or burn going through the English Gardens. All those trees in the background are wrapped in weld mesh so that they can't be eaten by the beavers. And there's a close-up of one there. You see the mesh around that. It's a cheap and cheerful solution. And that's the kind of thing that we should be doing more of around our network to secure big striker trees, if you like.
Not any other deterrents other than metal, as a chemical deterrent that you could use?
You can put sand and paint into a mixture. I don't think the paint that works best with it is authorised in the UK, though, but that's what they do in some other countries. They put a mix of sand and paint, and they paint the bark, and it puts the beaver off. But the weld mesh, from a railway point of view, is readily available. So it's the kind of thing that we should use.
I'm thinking natural coffee grounds.
They're not slugs, you know.
No, I know, but I'm not suggesting we put little pots of beer to entice the beavers into it to drown. But I think if you had some sort of paste with coffee grounds, you could wipe around the bottom of the tree, that would put the beavers think, oh, do you know what?
That would wash off. It would weather off, I think. It needs something like the paint, but it stays on. Yeah. So next for us, we don't want to rest on our laurels. We do a lot of inspections of our assets, and our regular inspection regime is kind of considered enough to kind of find these issues as they're happening. They're reasonably well enough. But what worries me a little bit is those unseen burrows that you just don't know are there, and you'd like to know about them a bit earlier. How can we get ahead of the curve? It's not like a badger set. You can see a badger set from a mile off. The entrances are above ground. These entrances are below the water level. We're never going to see them until it's too late, potentially. So there's a technology called synthetic aperture radar, and they are suggesting to us that they can find these burrows by drone survey, and they can do an algorithm that shows us we've got a beaver lodge here, and that purple ring is where a ground truth known burrow was. And then the red area, they can see that void underground. There's nothing reflecting off that. They know that there's a bit of a depression under there. So they've been able to pinpoint the extent of that lodge, which will make the ecologists' life a bit easier as well if they know the extent.
Was that done from a drone?
Done from a drone. A
Could
load
that,
of different flying styles.
could that be deployed by the Network Rail helicopter, or does it have to be outsourced?
But I'm in discussions with them about that, but they think the drone's probably easier for the cost of putting the helicopter up. If it's going by it, it's not a big
The
deal.
helicopter's got, you know, weekly use as an end, it's now covering quite a bit of the infrastructure. They've moved it from the same cycle to 4 different.
And it doesn't have SAR on it, so you'd have to get the rig from the provider. And if you're going to all that length, it's probably cost effective to just let them use their drone.
Right.
And the drone that they use is about 19 kilos or something like that. It's almost the weight of a beaver. It's not allowed to fly right over the line without a line block. So it can fly at oblique angles. So that's what we're going to do. It'll fly oblique.
Probably the price of the helicopter, like says.
Yeah, but the helicopter has regular cycles. We pay for so many hours a year, and it has weekly cycles that it does. So if you could get it on there, you haven't got the restriction of only like line of sight or line blocks.
And there'll be other
like
reasons
that.
for him to be there, so you can dovetail with the work that he's already doing and get the work you need done at the same time.
I take it you would only deploy it in that case if there's, there's an issue already. You would
Yes,
deploy
or
a drone if there's.
an area like Loch Inch where we're a bit concerned about, we don't know where these beavers are going to be. It'd be good to get him to be capturing that while he's doing flyover there anyway, and getting kind of regular footage of that few miles of track to make sure that there's nothing giving us any concern, any kind of build-up of material or any signs of slippage or anything like that, anything that would make us want to get boots on the ground.
They're doing that for us now for structures and for earthworks, all the inspections that were on the patrollers that we said they're not patrolling anymore, and these become very, we have to go out specifically to look at these. The helicopter now does for us. So if they're doing them for structures and earthworks, it's just an extension of that. They'll fly over it. We'll go, I can see that. I'm happy I can do that. And we'll go, that's now on my list of things I'll inspect on a routine.
It all strengthens the business case for us having our own helicopter in the route. And the more it can do, take away work from all the driving hours that would be needed to go up to places like that. And they're quite widely distributed. If that's getting footage at least twice a year, we can kind of track that.
How quickly does things change on site? So if you had, let's say, one young beaver suddenly finds a really nice spot, at what frequency would you have to fly in the route to pick that up? Where it was
a bit of an
concern.
If they block a culvert, it doesn't take long to start an impoundment. And the longer it's in there, the bigger that impoundment gets. And that was part of the trouble at Gleneagles. We had to get all the permissions with Nature Scot. We then had to navigate our way through the breeding season before we'd be allowed to do anything. So before we knew anything about it, we had to wait 2 or 3 months, and then it's gone from being started the way up that fence to nearly at the top of that fence. And that is quite a big increase in height, but the volume of that bowl that water was in, it was huge. And we had 2 pumps going, and it was doing nothing. It was in for weeks and just barely dropped the level down to half the way. But that did help a little bit. But it also helped us understand that was never going to work.
The reason why I'm asking is in simple practice, we're looking at effectively something similar to twist value. Right? Beaver value X responds within time frame Y to do something about it. But the first thing is the intelligence to know that location is a concern.
Once we find that they're there, we then need to go out and monitor and see what's going on, and see if it is a problem and what perceivable problems there are there as well, and then try to get a kind of plan together for it. You don't have to do very much when you consider that they've been around the infrastructure now since the early 2000s, that we've had a handful of incidents where we've had to kind of take a look at something. But it's probably going to worsen because they are going to get more and more in terms of number, and they will create a bit of work for us. But
they could be providing benefit.
They will be.
Maybe require payment to the beaver chief.
We'll pay them with our patience. I think that's how we're going about it, and we hope that they're grateful. So one of the issues we've got: whose beavers are they anyway? Whose responsibility is it? Is it is it drainage and line side? Are we meant to keep the boundary intact? We're meant to make sure that
Mhm.
vegetation's safe. We're meant to make sure that the water's flowing. Is it structures? Blocks, culverts? A block culvert is a perfectly good culvert apparently, so it's not theirs if they can get away with it. But it could lead to a possible blowout and damage to the culvert, so they're obviously interested. But if it is blocked, then it's really coming to drainage.
Innocent bystanders, I think.
Earthworks, yes, they should also be interested, the geotech team, because they can burrow into these earthworks and cause stability issues. And what I haven't got up here, I don't think, is I've not mentioned track, because there could be track geometry issues, but all these things are kind of interlinked in the system that is the railway, and maintenance, they're responsible for everything, unfortunately, and they can't keep up. This is just another headache for them, really.
But the first thing in maintenance is identification,
Yeah.
inspection, recording, noting you have an issue.
Somebody needs to
then-
raise a red flag and
Then pass it to drainage and licensed structures
Mm.
for earthworks. No. Identify the problem, hand it off.
That's it. And if they can do some, if there's just minor maintenance needed, then hopefully they can do that, like clearing out a culvert if it's starting to kind of get a bit blocked up, but not a clear and obvious dam. If there's chewed trees, can they protect them with the mesh and things like that? These are things that are in their gift to fix. It does need a bit more collaboration. We're looking to get a working group up and running. It's kind of been a bit slow. Start to CP7's been quite hectic, so we've not really kind of followed that as we would like. There's a few other fires to fight first. The kind of things that we can do: report these sightings to the TME, OTME, look for spoil and slippage on embankments so that the earthworks guys can get a look at that and work out what's causing it, and if it's a risk at all. Look for areas of flooding near culverts. If there's flooding around the culvert, there's probably something in there. Can we work out what it is? Could just be, could be any material, but it could also be a beaver if there's other signs. Is there accumulation of signs we're looking for, like the chewed bark and the shavings, pointy tree stumps that suggest there used to be a tree there?
Is there an opportunity here to use AI in this identification? So when you said look for, right, so we do lots of looking for, we do lots of imaging from drones and the like. And we're surrounded by big data. How do we identify from that image what is the concern?
Some of that can't be done by AI, but things like a block culvert probably can be detected as a land use change, because you should notice the impoundment increasing in size, and there are satellite aided tools that can do that. There's a thing called Project Lucy, and that's the land use change initiative. I think that is in flight, and that is looking at stuff going on outside the boundary that might indicate that you have something to worry about. And that could be simply increased housing. Is your boundary at a class 3 now suitable? That there's all this housing there. Is there now cattle in an area that didn't used to have any animals in it? All that would help us respond quicker to doing a renewal that's more fit for purpose if we can detect land use changes like that. And an impoundment would be one of those things that could probably be picked up by that technology.
And if nothing else, it would rule out beavers as a cause. So when we look at the Althouse burn and its meanderings, and we say, well, obviously what's happening here is trees have fallen over the burn, and they've gathered material and prevented natural flow of the burn. But none of that is attributable to a beaver problem. It's just natural tree fall.
Yeah, well, we need that technology to tell us where there's a red flag, and then when we get to site, we're not wasting time looking at everything. We're going to where the red flags are, and then we find out what the issue is, and it might be a beaver, it might be natural, but there'll be work to do if it's kind of flagging up.
Do they, in terms of the territory, move? So when the kids are grown and mum and dad's had enough of them and they chuck them out, do they move along the stream? Do
They will,
upstream, downstream?
but they'll move in either direction. They'll move to where they're not getting attacked by the next set of beavers. Basically, that's basically the life of it.
The outskirts of the town, then perhaps, where the games aren't being played.
They might have to go to a suboptimal place. Really, from our point of view, we would like them moving up the catchment, because that's where they'll do their best
Mhm.
work lower down. And more likely to come into kind of human wildlife conflict, and they're more likely to be near arable land and then run into that issue as well. There's a lot more we can do in terms of supporting
I think the
probably
underlying
farmers to
question
kind of
was,
cohabit with them as well.
do we understand beaver behaviour enough to understand what happens at that critical time in their life where they get chucked out the family environment and they're left to fend for themselves?
Yeah. It's well tracked, it's well known, because they're only new to Scotland, but there's plenty of textbooks out there. They will travel miles when they're kicked
really?
out. They will go for quite a distance. They'll travel over land for miles as well,
On the ground nowadays, isn't it?
but they would rather be in the water. They feel safer. So, and there's not that many territories that they can't get along the water and find somewhere at the minute, because it's a founder population. But at some point when we get more
They are like
congested,
the population. So
yeah,
when Bobby gets old enough and he has to move, mum and dad's chucked him out, he'll go east perhaps, find a water course and think, this is cool, I'm going to set up camp here.
they will. There's no reason for them to move. If they've got everything they need, then they're not going to move. They'll maintain their habitat, and they'll take a long time to move anyway. I mean, they can eventually exhaust a stretch and then move to the next, but
Right, so sorry, all the silt could start to stack up, and then the dam is not working anymore, and then they move
yeah,
to another place where they can
or they could be
do another
killed
dam.
or predated or otherwise taken out, and then there's nobody maintaining the dam, then the dam will just deteriorate and then it'll blow out. But what that silt that's left then enriches the area that used to be flooded, and you then get a really rich grassland that kind of grows in there. They call them a beaver meadow, and it's quite good for the environment that you get really lush, good grassland grown in those areas. Depends what it used to be. It might have been preferable to be something else, but
Do they have a natural
Farm.
predator other than us?
not in the UK. But if lynx get reintroduced, they would probably try and take them. But that seems a bit far off on ambition.
My cat when I go home tonight.
So, yeah. No, the otters will take out the young. The young ones are vulnerable, but the
Yeah.
adults being 20 to 30 kilos, there's not a lot going to mess with them. And they've got big teeth. They're not scared to defend themselves. So yeah, people have died from being bitten by a beaver because it can take an artery out.
Big teeth.
Yeah, they leave quite a big wound, so people have bled out from that. I wouldn't mess with them. Didn't like them to stick my head in to the bottom to see if they were occupied.
Home.
Nice and quick. Start with the endoscope. Can you see anything? Have a closer look and a torch, and then hope nothing's in there.
I was going to ask, given they're so territorial, given the move away, obviously far enough away from the parents to be acceptable, but how do they normally come across mates?
I guess that is just
The outskirts
Yeah.
populations, and hopefully they might meet in the middle.
Could be.
so that's happened
Who knows?
near my mum and dad. There was a male beaver just at Stirling County Rugby Club as well. They stay on the other side of the water from the rugby club, and there's been one beaver there for a year, and then earlier this year 2 were seen, and then by the end of the summer 5 were there because they'd had 3 kits.
Are they all members?
I don't think they'll be paying, but it's amazing because loads of people like to walk their dog around the periphery of the pitches around there, and it looks to me like it'd be quite disturbed for an above ground burrow, but they're there. People seem to mind. They're out every night, quite the thing. Yeah, they don't seem too intimidated by dog walkers and stuff being around there, and I've seen them
They're not
at the golf
frightened
club in
of dogs.
Aberfeldy, like around that
Oh.
way. There's loads of people there, and they're in an island in the middle, and they cut around that way all the time. I think the locals get a bit fed up of all the tourism there for the beavers.
Sadly, we don't have too many boots in the ground these days. Unless there's a problem and somebody goes out to investigate it.
Yeah, and that's where
Mm.
the land use change detection kind of AI will come in to kind of help us with stuff like that. But yeah, they're not creating too many headaches, but there's a lot of potential there as the population grows, so we need to be ready for it. And that's the summary there. If we are proactive with the measures and protections we put in place, there's more positives than negatives with this animal.
In terms of the risk,
trying to
then, I
cohabit.
mentioned the risk profile. right, yeah, there could be a risk. What's the very what? Okay, we know the very worst that could happen. What the likelihood of beaver activity creating the situation where trains might derail?
We'd need to be sleeping on it for that to happen. That doesn't just start at catastrophic. There will be some kind of clue there that there's an issue before that, and that's another reason for to look at the SAR radar technology to see how beneficial that is. Because if that is working well, where we know that there's known territories near the railway, we could get proactive and start looking at that and working out where there are burrows, and then do we need to be mindful that there's issues there and more aware of the kind of defects that are getting reported, any rough rides, for instance, that track level or anything like that, and making sure that the culverts are flowing as they should.
Could be something, something preventative, like we know that, I don't know, Kingusi area could be potentially dangerous. Start working now just to accommodate the culverts, the pipes, or doing the pyramid that you were talking about before.
You can have those
avoid the
beaver
problem
passes
before
in.
it comes.
Yeah, we could definitely be putting those beaver passes in so they don't get blocking them. We could look to mesh the embankments in those areas. There's a lot of expense to that.
That's
and
the only problem.
that will be the difficulty. How do we convince people that we need to do that when they're not really causing an issue now? It's unfortunately the way, but an issue really has to happen before people really heavily invest in being prepared for it. It's just a potential issue at the moment.
A modern day track recording unit very rarely goes up past Glen Eagles. It usually goes up to Aberdeen.
What's that, sorry?
The track recording unit that comes every other week tends to go to Aberdeen via Fife.
Yeah.
They don't go up past Glen Eagles or Birmingham Main Line.
Right.
So do we have a register of where they are at the moment? And is that being maintained in terms of, you ones spotted up there, Junior's left there, he's over there now.
That's the directory, because we need to protect him, don't we? So you need to know that if you're going to go do some
Yeah,
work
yeah.
there.
We're trying to have more of a closure of that loop of information. The ecologists know where things have been reported and where they think there's a degree of risk there, and they will, off their own back, do a bit of kind of assessment of that and go back and check. Even if there's nothing happening, nobody complaining about it, they will then take a look for issues that maybe on an annual basis. But there isn't really not a necessity for it. We don't do it for any other animal. We don't do it for badgers. Like
You don't do it for red squirrels?
we aren't doing that sort of thing anyway. We'll survey.
I thought we kept them as a directory.
I wouldn't say it's entirely up to date. I'd say there's way more out there than is on that.
If you know about them.
Yeah. They should be going into the hazard directory and also onto GRUNM. We should be getting that information fed down to the centre so that we can upload it.
I'm feeling shortly we'll be electrifying up the Perth. So that's a good chance to catch it.
Yeah, and then the A9s to be drilled as well. So the ones that can gallop, and although we've grouted it, they were on a short tenancy there anyway. I think that would have those ponds would have gone for the dueling anyway. So, but they can't get into that bit at the minute. We're going to run the SAR over that to make sure that there's nothing.
We're not going to go in love with these guys piling bloody piles into the railway, are they?
They're remarkably resilient to that kind of disturbance, like the stuff that they put up with us there trying to get rid of that block culvert. We're there every day. Our cameras were catching them after we were away, back rebuilding it. It was really hard to keep up with them until we could really put a dent in it by dismantling it from the other side.
Well, they often well overdue. I'm thinking they're
they're very good at going under the water. We've got cameras there and we don't get as much footage as you would think.
They're a very confident, resilient animal. And when we do these things to the culverts that force them into a different MO, it's not the same way as when we introduce badger tunnels, like we did in way back when the Larkhall branch introduced the badger tunnel, but nobody pointed a sign towards the tunnel for the badgers. You go, this is the way, badger, this way, you go that way under the track. And when it went up over the track the way they'd always done and got squidged by the trains, it was that why didn't the badger tunnel work?
They're really dedicated to their trails. So if you're going to do something like that, you need to do it bang on the line that they're already on. And then they might, if you bait it as well with biscuits and peanut butter and stuff like that, they will then start using it. You put some at the entrance and some at the other side, and they get it into the red.
Quite fond of peanut butter. I can understand that.
Yeah,
I'm
peanut
quite
butter.
fond of peanut butter myself.
Optimal mix
Yeah.
is digestive and peanut butter doesn't fit.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
Yeah.
no,
It's in the fridge, maybe.
no, it's in the fridge.
I remember being at a presentation from a Canadian engineer. He was a track engineer just talking about the various challenges they face in Canada. But beavers was quite a major one for him. I think probably just because it's such a common species there. But he said that their main tool was helicopter monitoring. And they had a helicopter up all the time, just looking for new beaver dams. But I remember one thing that he said that was interesting was that they weren't just looking for flooding immediately adjacent to the railway. Sometimes there was huge dams that were maybe 3 or 4 miles away. They were having to keep an eye on that as well, because if anything happened to the dam, it could end up being a
shout bush.
Yeah.
And that is a risk as well for us at some point. That kind of thing could be problematic, but
Exactly, we'll need to look at the washout of the canal, understand what kind of destruction that can cause. So when you've got any kind of impediment to natural water flow, it's the what if that goes one day.
it's quite hard to do a controlled dismantling of a beaver dam that's in a culvert as well, because once the water starts getting into it, it starts to degrade and it's in a controlled space. So the guys are very good at doing that on one occasion, but when we had it on the grill at the front, once you started getting that loosened off, it degraded very quickly on that because it wasn't as big as it maybe naturally would be because it was pinned against the mesh. And in fact, I think it was the mesh that went. The mesh couldn't cope with the weight and the volume and the force of the water, so it went faster than we planned to let that out. And probably another reason that the estate didn't really care for us, that then flooded a bit of their road. Those ditches, the culverts and those small ditches on the downstream side, they were at capacity very quickly with that flow of water, and then it was going up onto the side of that. But they can't have it both ways. Either want us to kind of manage it and get rid of the dams and stuff like that, or we've got to do the work. But we wanted that released in particular to go a bit slower. But once the mesh kind of caved, more went. The idea of that mesh is it never gets that high. The problem with that is we didn't have the licenses in place to work as quickly as we wanted. And we've got a camera that's on that particular culvert all the time, just in case we need to get in and remove it, because you get a couple of weeks before the dam is established and you need a license. So if we see that starting to accumulate, then we can act on it within a few days, really. So, but that'll be hard to roll out across the entire country, but it's letting us learn how to manage this as best we can. I think there's maybe been some questions or some comments that come in.
Yeah, I'll just check that. If anybody's got any questions online that aren't in the chat already, if you just stick your hand up to come in. Yeah. Tom, I think you asked a question. I'm not sure if that's been answered or not. And you just said, what changes are required to reintroduce beavers to specific parts of the railway neighbourhoods to the greater benefit of the railway? And does it require neighbouring landowner consent?
It's that whole thing about, so if the railway was to say, well, actually, what the beavers are doing is quite beneficial to us in terms of floodwater control, could we promote the introduction of beavers in this area? I'm thinking, just slightly eastwards of Thornley Bank to slow the pluvial flow down there and leave it at a manageable level. Would we have to then enter into discussion with neighbouring landowners to say, we'd like to put the beavers in here, is that okay with you? Or
I don't think we'll get to that point. I think we'll let others start moving them around. I think that's the most likely way that will happen. We'll naturally start to move up the catchment, and I think we just need to bide our time with that and wait to see it happen. I don't think we would go actively looking to do that. Not at the minute anyway. It might be something that comes out of the climate resilience programme. We might start to identify areas where we know that there's a real risk to the network of long-term flooding and high rainfall events. So we might work out that there's areas at risk and then look to see how we can do nature-based solutions there to create more wetland and capacity within the catchment upstream of that. We'd maybe do it more of a engineered way than moving beavers in, because there's a lack of control with that, and then there would be a lot of consultation needed Nature Scotland already have moved them. I've went and done the consultation with certain land owners that are nearby. Some have been given the green light to move them in. Others are taking a bit more time. But there was real opposition to them going into the spey catchment. The fishermen didn't want them.
So not a lot of proactive stuff we can do. More monitoring and watch this space kind of stuff.
It kind of is a watch this space sort of thing. The country will benefit when they get higher up the catchment. There will definitely be some improvements. That doesn't mean to say it will be risk-free. There will be incidents where roads get washed out and stuff like that because a dam's there, or a blown out dam will cause some infrastructure damage, but it's not like we don't have that kind of flooding event anyway. So if you get 9 events improved or lessened by beavers being present and 1 worsened, then there's a better ratio there, but it's all unknowns. But it seems natural that we would want them to get into those kind of catchment areas. And people might point out that they're present in areas like Poland and they've just had horrendous flooding. Beavers aren't going to stop the weather events that were happening, but if we can get better resilience to the less catastrophic ones, and there's plenty of them that kind of impact our day-to-day lives over the winter when you get really bad, intense rain, and you get kind of small scale flooding and things like that. That's the sort of thing where you'll see the benefit. The big major events will always be a major event, and there's nothing like beaver.
I agree. It's not something you would try and introduce to reduce the likelihood of an next Carmen issue, which was a flooding event, essentially. But where there are benefits that beavers could provide, just to say, as some of our European neighbours have done, that actually introduction of beavers is to be encouraged rather than, reaching for your gun.
Well, that's been the view within the business so far. They're not putting a huge amount of risk onto us, so why wouldn't we try to cohabit with them and do our duty as a publicly funded body to find a way to get used to living with these animals like we do all the other species, not be too reactionary about it. Nature Scotland landowners to learn to live with these animals, and like you said, Canadian Railways operate. They've got lots of beavers there too. They can be problematic. We've kind of acknowledged that in the slides. They can and will be at times, but we need to just ready ourselves, and maybe we need to go away and do a bit of learning with the Canadian Railway to see what they're doing. Similarly with Deutsche Bahn. Sounds good. Don't know how we'll get around the no flight policy, but we'll give it a try.
I'll do that. Yeah.
That's what you can. I don't think there's any other questions online. Just a bit of feedback, saying very interesting presentation from people online. So
good, thank you very much.
Yeah, just to wrap it up, I'd just like to say thanks very much, James, for giving up your time. It's a really interesting subject. I think they're absolutely fascinating animals. Like some of the structures that you showed us, amazing. Just an amazing bit of architecture. It's been done by a mammal.
Tried to keep it railway focused, but there's some of those beaver dams are visible from space, like in places like Canada. There's hundreds of meters long and massive. You can see them in satellite imagery and stuff like that. They're huge. And they can last a long time.
Literally just be with a pair of beavers, maybe with a few kits. That's it.
Those big ones are probably managed by a bigger family where they've got more space to allow different. Their relatives are maybe a bit further down, but they'll all maintain it, and there'll be enough habitat that they can help with that.
There's no much.
There is something there.
Yeah,
I'm sure
this like such iconic animal, like really laborious, hard-working animal. So that's a symbol for the Canadian Railways.
Yeah,
I think the Institute of Chartered Engineers, their slogan is a beaver, I believe. I'm sure. I think that's on their emblem.
Yeah, I remember when they were talking about the Knapdale reintroduction. I just thought it was a great thing, and it's obviously going to create challenges because they seem to be doing very well in terms of expanding their territory, and it's going to give us challenges going forward.
I believe those were Scandinavian source beavers, and a lot of the take catchment are Germanic, so there's different genetic diversity there, and it's going to be a good thing that they meet eventually. But they're certainly making their way up towards the Oban line at the minute, and once they get down to Crooken, they can just swim right down that lock and they'll meet the other ones eventually, so they'll be able to take a right good shortcut once they get there.
No common language between them, obviously.
I'm sure they'll figure it out.
I figured, yeah. Well, beat it out.
Perhaps the mom and the dad know.
Pistols
The
at the-
little Bobby will
Yeah.
learn everything.
So if everybody could just thank James in the usual manner, please.
Thank you.
Come on. Thanks everyone for joining online. I hope the sound issues were resolved in the end for everybody.
I think it will fill us. Very clear, isn't it?
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Works
guys.
in the end.
Great.